All right, here we go. Welcome into College Football Now. Harrison Graham, Tyler Jones with you as we got about 30 minutes or so until the College Football Playoff Committee will release their third batch of rankings this year. Gonna be some movement, Tyler. BYU upset by your Kansas Jayhawks. Big win for KU. And then there you go, sporting the Yeti there. And then also with Tennessee losing to Georgia. That two-loss SEC bunch is going to be pretty interesting to see what they do with that this week and also moving forward. So lots to discuss leading up. We'll have our mock rankings and maybe talk through some scenarios and how that could play out as well.
There's a lot of crazy stuff going on, and one of the things I've mentioned on this very program the last couple of weeks, Harry, was that you might not want to play in your conference championship game, and based on how many two-loss teams there are in the SEC and how things are playing out in the Big Ten, it's looking like I may be right on this aspect as far as trying to lock up a playoff spot goes. The conference championship might hurt you.
Yeah, we'll get into it, but if the scenario where 6 SEC teams are 10-2, do you want to be the one that gets to the SEC title game and loses?
Because that could you can't afford a third loss.
That could actually knock you out in theory.
Yes.
So it's going to be fascinating to see how this thing plays out over the next couple of weeks. Shout out your favorite team. Let us know who you're representing. Ty Man's rolling with the Buckeyes. So is Wayne. Vampire going with Penn State. Not sure how you get that text on your YouTube username there. Matthew with Georgia. Devin is rolling with the Canes. Taco Tuesday in the chat. A couple of Taco Tuesdays. I could go for some tacos.
That sounds good.
Sounds pretty good. Continue to represent your squad in the comments. And we're just reminding you guys every week it is a new playoff system this year. 12 teams for the first time ever will have a chance to compete for a national championship. The 4 highest-ranked conference champs will earn the top 4 seeds. And in theory, that doesn't have to be the 4 Power 4 conferences. Depending on what happens in the ACC and Big 12, a Boise State, for example, could theoretically be that 4th seed.
And I was listening to Heather Dinich earlier, the ESPN College Football Playoff reporter, and she's projecting. I don't know what your projections are, Harry. I'll find out in real time like everybody else. But she's projecting Boise State ahead of BYU and Boise State getting that first-round bye.
It's possible. I debated that within myself earlier today when I went through my projections. You guys will see what I projected it out. But it would not shock me if the rankings tonight had Boise State as the 4th overall seed, not the 4th ranked team. Again, there's a distinction between the rankings and the seedings because the top 4 seeds will be the highest ranked, or the top 4 highest-ranked conference champs.
Well, and think about this, Harry. So 2 of my big takeaways from how the committee is operated, and it's always different every year because the committee likes to change their rules. They have valued head-to-head.
Yep.
And they have also valued your quality loss. And so the debate for BYU compared to Boise State could come down to, hey, Boise State went toe-to-toe with the number 1 team in the country, the Oregon Ducks. That's their only loss. BYU, you lost to a 6-loss Kansas team.
Yeah.
That could be the difference.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You would think, just like playing it out further, if both teams won out the rest of the way, that BYU would re-jump Boise just because they'll beat a ranked opponent in the Big 12 title game. But who knows? It is the College Football Playoff Committee. And
let me be the first to say, too, that this Kansas team is the best 4-win team of all time. That loss isn't as bad as it looks record-wise.
See, that's where I don't trust the committee, though, because am I supposed to believe the committee has watched every single Kansas game this year? I don't. But anyone who has watched them close, this team right now that just beat BYU is not the team that we saw in late September who could not get out of their own way. If they're playing it, this is the team that had some people picking them to compete to win the Big 12.
If they had been playing like this all season, we'd be talking about Kansas contending for a Big 12 title right now, coming off back-to-back top 25 wins. Here's something else, too, to BYU's advantage. If you look a little further at that Kansas team, Harry, Alabama and Georgia are the only teams in America that have more top 25 wins than Kansas.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Do you like the expanded playoff? L for like, D for dislike. I don't know how you can't like it, Harry.
Yeah, I think there's – I was trying to think of this the other day. And the 4 – like, who would even be the 4 teams in the old system? I guess right now it would be Oregon, Ohio State, Texas if they were to win out.
And Georgia.
So, like, that wouldn't be fun.
A 2-loss Georgia in there?
Yeah, or I don't even know if it would be like. I guess if Indiana beat Ohio State, they'd be in there. But, yeah, I think this is the perfect year for this system to be in place because even Oregon, who's undefeated, is not a dominant team. Like, we saw that on Saturday. They easily could have lost to Wisconsin. So it's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out. More discussion to come, but I do want to tell you guys about tonight's sponsor. That is Prize Picks, daily fantasy made easy. Tons of sports available, football, basketball, hockey, and a whole lot more, esports as well, fighting sports. PrizePicks.com/CLNS. Code CLNS is the place to sign up and take advantage of our deal, which is this. When you set your first lineup, if you're a new customer, play for $5, you're going to get a $50 bonus into your account. Little example of what a PrizePicks lineup could look like. I'm taking Jalen Milroe more than 214.5 passing yards this week against Oklahoma. I'm going to go Shedeur Sanders less, 320.5 passing yards against Kansas. That's a lot of yards. I know Shedeur's been cooking, but like we just said, Kansas has been playing a lot better as of late. 5 to win 15 there. You can set lineups of 2 to 6 players as long as you got players on at least 2 different teams. More players you got, obviously, the more money you can make. PrizePicks.com/CLNS. Use the code CLNS to get started today for that $50 bonus once you play for $5. Pick more, pick less. It's simple. Check out Prize Picks today. All right, let's go through. Is this the last week's rankings? Last week's rankings, 25 all the way to 1. Obviously, you look at this bunch, Tyler. South Carolina took down Missouri. Any small chance Mizzou had is now dead. LSU lost as well, so they're done. Army lurking there. They play at Notre Dame this week. If they could beat them, I think they enter that group of 6 auto bid discussion with Boise State at that point.
Yeah, I think so. That's going to be a great atmosphere, by the way. They're playing at Yankee Stadium
That's right,
in New
Yankee
York.
Stadium. Yep.
I think that'll be fascinating to watch, but if Notre Dame plays like they did against Navy, then Army doesn't have much of a chance.
If a 3-loss team makes the playoffs, South Carolina could be the team to do it because they still have Clemson on the schedule. That would be another ranked win opportunity. They were 20th last week. They'll likely move up a few spots after beating Pitt. Both Louisville and Washington State suffered losses last week, so they're going to drop. Colorado is going to move up, Tyler, because Kansas State, the team that they did not have the head-to-head advantage against, they lost to Arizona State. Producer Jack Lauderay's alma mater, who should enter the rankings this week. They play BYU this week in a massive game in the Big 12. The winner of that in great position to make the Big 12 championship game.
Yeah, that should be a lot of fun. And you look at Colorado, that's a team that I would not want to face right now. Shedeur's playing well. Travis Hunter's playing well. The offensive line's greatly improved. The defense is better. One of the things we've talked about, Harry, over the last few weeks is with this new playoff format, it's not necessarily about who the best team is for the season, but who gets hot at the right time, and Colorado's cooking right now.
Don't they feel like a team if they just got in? Like, I'm not saying they'd win the national title, but like, I could see them making the Final Four. Like, I think that's absolutely on the table with the star power that they have.
Absolutely, no question.
So keep an eye on them. Texas A&M at 15, the first of 2-loss SEC teams that still have 2 losses. We'll see if they move up tonight. SMU, Boise holding serve last week. They're still firmly in the mix right there. Georgia getting that huge win over Tennessee. They're certainly going to move up, Tyler. They have 3 ranked wins right now. As flawed as they've looked, that resume is pretty strong. They didn't beat Ole Miss head-to-head, though, so we'll see if the committee still honors that, even though Georgia has the better resume up to this point. Bama at number 10, another 2-loss SEC team. Miami at 9. We'll talk about them further. I think it's pretty simple for the Canes. Win out, win the ACC title, you're in the playoff. If not, you're out. Notre Dame at 8, big game against Army like we mentioned. Tennessee, how far do they drop? Are they at the bottom of the 2-loss SEC teams outside of maybe Texas A&M? We'll have to wait and see. BYU, Tyler, that's the question. How much do the Cougars drop? Because they've been skating by for weeks now, and it finally caught up to them. They lost a close one at home against Kansas.
Yeah, it felt like they were due, that eventually their luck was going to run out. And that game, you look at the second half, they did not play well.
No.
I think that when you look at that, too, it's not just that BYU lost. We talk a lot about eye test. They didn't look good either. And I think that there is a big emphasis in not just if you lose, but how you lost, and that wasn't a good day at all for BYU.
I think their only path is winning the conference title now. I think their only way to get in as an at-large was to make the Big 12 title game at 12-0 and then lose. I think it's over now. I don't think at 11-1 or 11-2 or whatever they can get in.
Right,
so.
Because if they don't win the Big 12, then that's going to be a second loss, and there's going to be other two lost teams ahead of them.
It won't be a strong enough resume.
Right.
Indiana, Ohio State this week. I think the committee's got kind of an Indiana dilemma right now because, yes, they're in the Big Ten, but they have played easily the worst schedule of any SEC or Big Ten team. It's not their fault, but it just fell that way in terms of how the conference schedule lined up. And this is kind of part of the problem with the big expansion, with the big conferences, is not all schedules are going to be not just even slightly unequal, in some cases extremely unequal. And, if you're Indiana this week, Tyler, you got to avoid the blowout, I think. If you get blown out by Ohio State, that could knock them all the way out, I think. I think that's on the table.
It certainly is. And you look at what they've done. I mean, who's their best win? Michigan? Michigan isn't very good.
Illinois. Have they played Illinois?
They have not played Illinois.
Yeah.
They're non-conference. They played FIU, Western Illinois, and Charlotte.
Because it's one of those deals where, look, like, I don't like being the guy of just throw all the 2- and 3-loss SEC teams in. They've played tougher schedule. I don't like playing that game. But you do have to be objective with this and look at the schedule. If Ohio State, as we take a look at this matchup, let's say they go win this game 38-10.
Yeah.
What can Indiana hang its hat on? Sure, they blew out a bunch of bad teams, and they deserve a lot of credit. I think even at 11-1, they would need some help. They would need one or two of those 2-loss SEC teams to drop a game because,
and they could get the help. We're not saying that it's completely over for them.
I'm saying it's out of their hands if they get blown out.
Yeah, I agree.
That's what I'm saying. So I think if you're Indiana, now if you go there at Ohio State and play within 10 points, I think that's pretty notable. But the question is, can they do that? So, look, I'm rooting for them. I think it'd be a great story if they won this game somehow. I don't think it's impossible, but doesn't this feel like it could have blowout potential? Historically, this is a game where Ohio State just dominates.
Yes, but here's where I would challenge you on that, Harry, is that Ohio State has not looked dominant this year.
That's true.
They're
not a team that
to
blows
their
out
competition throughout much of the season. And while we say on paper, sure, Ohio State's got 40 NFL players compared to Indiana that's got maybe 2 or 3.
Yep.
Yeah, on paper that looks that way, but we haven't seen it from Ohio State. I have, based on the way these two teams have played, I don't have any reason to think blowout is in the cards right now. Maybe Ohio State's been saving their best game for Saturday, but we haven't seen it from the Buckeyes.
Well, look, Chip Kelly's offense has evolved. They don't run 80 plays a game anymore. They play slow tempo. It's more NFL that way. They huddle up some. Will Howard at quarterback, you're not really built to blow people out. It's more methodical.
They're not stretching the field at all.
Yeah, you're not getting a lot of explosives. So, yeah, in that case, it's just simple math. Less possessions equals closer games. So, listen, I would love to see Indiana win this game. I'm just saying, if you're the Hoosiers, you can't afford to get blown out. So, obviously, you're playing to win, but I think there could come a point in that game where it's like, hey, how do we keep this as close as possible if we can't win this game? You got to play that game a little bit too if you're Curt Cignetti. So it's going to be interesting to see how he manages that. If you love college football, hit that like button. We're here every single Tuesday night breaking down these rankings, going through our projections, reacting to what the committee does. Also, once the rankings come out, we'll react to that, but we'll also do a quick segment, a little college football head coach hot seat meter. We're going to take a look at 10 active coaches that could be on the hot seat and kind of rank in 3 different categories how hot their seat actually is. So stick around for that as well. You look at this game in the Big 12, Tyler, BYU at Arizona State. I don't want to say ASU is clearly the better team, but I think they've been playing better recently. I think that's fair to say. I think they're more explosive on offense. Levitt at quarterback's been pretty good, and BYU's been skating now. Do they get a wake-up call after finally dropping a game? I'll be curious to see how Kalani Sitake's team responds, because this is kind of an elimination game. If you lose this game, you're you're not getting to the Big 12 title game in all likelihood, especially ASU, but probably
Scadaboo's
BYU
been
too.
fantastic. I call him a poor man's Toby Gerhart.
Okay, I like that.
The way that he's been running. I mean, the guy's been unstoppable. I like what I've seen from Levitt. Producer Jack, I thought they called this place Mountain America Stadium now, or is it always going to be Sun Devil Stadium in your eyes?
Mike
you hear me?
malfunctions.
Oh.
There you are.
There he is.
Whoa.
Whoa.
He's cutting now. We got technical issues. He says it's always going to be Sun Devil Stadium.
Mountain America just doesn't have the same ring.
Is this the biggest game at ASU in like the last decade? I mean, I can't. I know there was that one year in the Pac-12, like in the mid-2010s, where there were like 6 teams in the mix late in the year, but this feels like this is one of the bigger games in a while for Arizona State.
Yeah, Kenny Dillingham's done an incredible job. And, you know, when you look at the Big 12 Coach of the Year race, you could go Dillingham, you could go with Sataki, you could go with Coach Prime. I mean,
That might be good. Oh, I'm good.
Dillingham, I've been a believer. I loved what they did last year. Even though they had a losing record, they were playing so close to their competition. I was one of the very first ones that said, watch out for Arizona State, that they're going to overachieve and surprise some people. But
they were picked dead last in the Big 12 preseason.
Not by me. Not by me.
They were by far, they're by far, in my opinion, biased opinion, the most underrated team in college football right now. And I think that Dillingham taking this program from 3 wins last year to competing for a Big 12 championship this year,
it's a great job.
Is incredible.
And think about this too. Might I remind the folks, Arizona State, what he walked into, that situation was a mess.
I mean, the Herm Edwards allegations, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Bowl ban last year, yeah. It's
for them to do what they're doing. I mean, it's a remarkable job. Dillingham's been fantastic.
And if
I lean towards them in this matchup.
And if they win this game, they would have the head-to-head over BYU. I'm pretty sure I'd have to double-check. They control their own destiny because they're ahead of Iowa State in the standings right now, so they must have the tiebreaker over them. I don't think they played head-to-head, but they have the tiebreaker probably based on record versus common opponents. And if they win out, they're in. So the winner of this game is kind of in the driver's seat, along with Colorado if they win their last 2 games.
I'm guaranteeing, and I said this earlier today, if Arizona State beats BYU, I'm guaranteeing they make the Big 12 championship because Arizona, and I know my dad's watching this, and he's a U of A grad.
They're not losing to Arizona.
Is absolute trash, and ASU is going to destroy them the day after Thanksgiving.
You heard
2 days after Thanksgiving.
I'll say this, though, Harry, and I'm a Big 12 apologist. I do love this league. But I think that based on what we saw from BYU the last few weeks, Arizona State, they've impressed, but they're still not an elite football team by any stretch. I think Colorado is the only team that potentially has any hope of doing any damage in the postseason.
Yeah, I think the only team in the Big 12 that can win a playoff game is Colorado because they have the ingredients to do it. They have an elite quarterback.
None of the other teams do.
No, they have an elite quarterback in Shedeur Sanders. I like Levitt. I like Beck at Iowa State. They're not elite, though. Shedeur's elite. They have an elite or a Heisman Trophy candidate in Travis Hunter. And listen, say what you want about Deion. They're clearly pretty well coached. Like, you watch them play, they've gotten much better in the trenches year over year from last year. I mean, they were a joke last year in the trenches. This year, they're much better. I mean, people laughed at the Warren Sapp hire. That defensive line gets after it. They're pretty good. So
the Warren Sapp hire was one of the best
position
coach hires in the country this year.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt. And you know what it is? It's, hey, we're going to bring this guy that kicked ass in the NFL to inspire some young players, and I would say it's been pretty effective with Deion and Warren Sapp. So I agree. I think they're the only Big 12 team that can actually do damage in the playoff if they get there.
And the sad reality, too, it's a one big league at this point.
Yeah,
you're
with
not going
BYU
to get
losing,
more than one Big 12 team in the playoff now.
Yeah. Who wins it? 1 for BYU, 2 for Colorado, 3 for ASU, 4 for Iowa State. Ty Man says BYU. Matthew and Christian go in Colorado.
Jackson Lauderay says BYU.
Joseph saying BYU. No Iowa State love. They got back on track with the win over the weekend. They need some help, though. They need what do they actually need to get in? So they probably need. Yeah, and that's pretty unlikely. That or they need one of BYU or Colorado to lose both their games, and that's a long shot. How about this game, Tyler, at Yankee Stadium? Army and Notre Dame. Is Army 9 or 10? Oh, because the Navy game. They are 9-0.
Yeah.
Just for the chaotic scenario, I want to see how the committee will handle this if they're 12-0, or I guess they're.
Well, they would play the American Conference Championship.
So let's say they win out. Let's say they win the American. They're 12-0. Let's say either Boise drops the game or they deem Army more worthy than Boise. What do? Do you say, hey, if you beat Navy, you get the last spot. Otherwise, it goes to Boise. So Boise.
No, there's nothing they can do. The playoff will be decided before.
So they could give it to Army, and then they could lose that Navy game.
Yes. In fact, what I would do if I was Army.
Crazy.
If I was Army, it's an exhibition game is what it is.
Play backups.
I would play the backups and just let that game play out.
Do you just call Navy and say, hey, we're playing backups. Y'all can do what you want, but this is not a typical Army-Navy game for us.
Yeah, it's an exhibition game.
We're playing for the playoff.
If they beat Notre Dame, they win out, then the Army-Navy game is an exhibition game.
Man, what a train wreck that would be.
I don't think it's as bad as people think. If they take the mindset that, yes, it's an exhibition game, then who cares?
Yeah, both teams just play backups. Oh, man.
I don't think Navy would play backups. I think they'd be trying to win
we're
still.
beating Army.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting. Do you think Army's got a shot in this game?
No.
We hyped this up earlier. I did not like Navy's chances against Notre Dame. I will say this. I do think Army is significantly better than Navy. Like, they were both unbeaten at the time. But if you looked at, if you dove deeper into the analytics, Army can actually throw the ball a little bit. Navy cannot. But that being said, you get them in these Power 5 opponent games, Power 4 games. 9 times out of 10, they just get physically overwhelmed. But
the thing I hate about this,
Notre Dame under Marcus Freeman, as good as they've been accustomed to random-ass losses.
The thing I hate about this, too, when it comes to this Notre Dame team, I know Notre Dame's 9-1. I still don't think they're that good themselves.
Yeah.
The Northern Illinois loss was arguably the worst loss of all playoff teams. They haven't really impressed me in their wins.
Their schedule's kind of a joke.
I just think that they're significantly better than Army, quite frankly. But I don't think that Notre Dame's a team that can go out there and win the national championship.
No. I've said for weeks, it's going to feel like 7 or 8 teams that make the 12-team playoff can win the Natty. I don't think Notre Dame is one of those teams.
No.
If they're in it.
Now, I'll say this. I do like the fact that because Notre Dame is not in a conference, they are not eligible for a first-round bye.
Yep.
But if you're Notre Dame, you think about this.
Get a home playoff game.
Would you rather have that home playoff game and not have to play in a conference championship game and control your schedule as opposed to playing in a conference title game? I still think it's a good path for Notre Dame that they're putting themselves in, even though they're not going to be eligible for first round.
Yeah, I mean,
bye.
if you get the 6 or 7 seed and you play, insert Tennessee or something. I mean, that's winnable. They could beat Tennessee.
Yeah, let's say best case scenario. What if they end up playing Boise State in a 5-12 matchup?
Yeah,
that's better than having to play in the ACC championship game against Miami and potentially being knocked out.
Well, and then you're going to play the 4 seed if you win it, which is either going to be the Big 12 champ or the ACC champ in all likelihood, which is going to be winnable. So there'd be a path there to make the semis if you're Notre Dame and that possibility. So I think Notre Dame and Miami, Tyler, are the 2 9-1 teams that it's very cut and dry. If they win out, they're in the playoff. If they lose even once, they're done. And there's
same with Indiana too.
No discussion. Well. Not if they lose close to Ohio State, though. I think if they're close against Ohio State, they could still make the playoff. If they lose 35-31.
They're in a better position than Notre Dame and Miami right now, for sure.
Yes. Because that would just be their first loss. All right, let's talk about the SEC a little bit, Tyler, because this thing, with Georgia beating Tennessee, this scenario is very much alive where all 6 of these teams finish 10-2 because Texas plays at Texas A&M in 2 weeks. So let's say both teams hold serve this weekend and the Aggies upset the Longhorns. They'd both be 10-2. Georgia's last 2 games are an FCS opponent, Georgia Tech. They're almost certainly going to be 10-2. Bama's got Auburn, I get it, rivalry game. And then I can't remember the other game, but it's an easy one. So they're going to be 10-2. Ole Miss at Florida this week, that's tricky, but if they can get through that one, they'll be 10-2 in all likelihood. And then Tennessee has, I think they play either an FCS team or a low D1 team this weekend, and at Vandy, which could be tricky, but in all likelihood, 10-2.
Tennessee plays UTEP and then Vandy.
There you go. So my point is this. If A&M beats Texas in 2 weeks, all 6 of these teams being 10-2 is very much on the table. So it creates 2 pieces of chaos. One, who are the 2 teams in the SEC championship game? One would be Texas A&M because they'd only have 1 conference loss. And 2, does the other, whoever the loser of the SEC title game, are they out? Because I'm not convinced 6 SEC teams are making the 12-team college football playoff.
Oh, the SEC championship, if we see a 2-loss team make it to the SEC title game and lose and get a 3rd loss, they're done. They're out of the playoff picture. I just don't see there being enough spots to include a 3-loss SEC team, even if that 3rd loss comes to the SEC title.
They would need the Big Ten to cannibalize. Like, they would need Penn State to suffer an upset loss, or, I don't know, Indiana beats Ohio State and maybe they get knocked out or something like that. But, yeah, I mean, keep an eye on the SEC. Now, look, it's college football. Is one of those teams bound to lose to somebody they shouldn't? Or maybe Texas just beats A&M and that just eliminates the problem. But that thing is, we're getting close to the finish line. We talk about these scenarios every year. I don't know if we've gotten this late in the year with this potential level of chaos with that many teams in a singular conference.
Yeah, I mean, it's changed now. One of the things with realignment where if you lose 2 or 3 games in the SEC, that's still a good year.
Yeah.
And really at the end of the day, for as much as we talk about seeding, like, hey, are you the 1 seed? Are you the 6 seed? Whatever it may be. You're just trying to get in and then go from there at that point. Yes, you would like to have the first round bye, but this is turning into like the NFL, where we've seen a number of times where teams had to go on the road in the NFL playoffs as a wild card team, and they still found a way to win the Super Bowl. So just because you're the 10, 11, or 12 seed doesn't mean you don't have a chance to still win the whole thing.
Sprint through our mock rankings here. I think Iowa State re-enters the rankings. I didn't know what to do with Mizzou and Washington State. They're not in the playoff picture, but got them sneaking in there into the rankings. I got Arizona State from unranked to 20th. I thought that was
Finally
an impressive win over Kansas State on the road over the weekend. Army sitting there at 19. I think South Carolina, Tyler, is the 1 3-loss team. If chaos ensues, they're the team to watch. They do play Clemson in 2 weeks. They could add another ranked win there. I've got Colorado at 16. And then you kind of get to this bunching where, I'm just kind of basing it on last week's rankings. SMU, A&M, Boise, all held serve.
You got BYU ahead of Boise,
I've got
though.
BYU staying ahead of Boise. Part of that is Boise the last few weeks hasn't looked great either. They have not been playing their best ball. So we'll see. I could see that being flipped, but keep an eye on those 2 spots. Tennessee at 11. I think they moved to the bottom of the 4 2-loss teams, other than A&M being the 5th one right there at 15th. Tennessee at 11, and then the other 3 ahead of them. Georgia at 10, Ole Miss at 9, Bama at 8, kind of the head-to-head philosophy. Bama beat Georgia. Ole Miss beat Georgia as well. So there's kind of the ordering there. Miami at 7. Don't feel great about it because their resume is not that strong, but the committee's liked them pretty good so far. Notre Dame up to 6. Kind of feel the same there, but again, just basing it on what I think the committee will do. And then you got the top 5, which I think looks the same based on the results that happened this weekend. So here we go. The College Football Playoff Committee is going to unveil their rankings shortly. We're going to react coming up here on College Football Now. Welcome in. He's Tyler Jones. I am Harrison Graham. It's time to unveil the 3rd batch of college football playoff rankings and the projected bracket. We will hear from the playoff committee here in just a few moments and react live with all of you. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button here on Chat Sports. We go live every single Tuesday night to react to this committee's rankings. And while you're at it, shout out your favorite team. We'll get a few shout outs, and then we can take a look at our mock bracket of what we think is going to happen tonight. But Tyler, I think the two things to watch tonight are A, how far does BYU drop, and tied into that, could Boise State leapfrog them as the fourth highest ranked projected conference champion, which would earn them the 4 seed? And B, how do they handle the 2-loss SEC teams? Because there's 5 of them right now.
Right, and we've seen the committee value 2 things so far, head-to-head and your quality losses. How much is BYU going to be punished for losing to a 6-loss Kansas as opposed to a Boise State team whose only losses to the number 1 team in the country, the Oregon Ducks?
And they played them very close.
Right. The SEC bunch, a lot of separating to figure out between those 2-loss teams, and potential some crazy tiebreaker scenarios to determine who's going to get the SEC title game. And do you even want to go to the SEC title game, potentially suffer a 3rd loss and get knocked out of the whole thing?
Yeah, that's very fair. Matthew says Georgia. Christian going with Indiana. Ty Man, Ohio State. We got Deacon rolling with the Ducks. U-Haul, Liberty. Boise all the way from Braden. Went out and you're going to be in, most likely, Braden. We got Scott rolling with Iowa. The Dogs from Raven.
I think
big win.
Ty Man is the secret Ohio Bobcats fan.
I love that. South Carolina from Nicholas. They're lurking. We'll see where they're ranked tonight after another big win over Mizzou. Let's take a look at my projected bracket. The rankings are on the far left, but remember, the bracket is not necessarily 1 through 12 of the rankings because it's the 4 highest ranked projected conference champions, and then when the real thing comes out, the 4 highest ranked conference champs. Tyler, I led with BYU ahead of Boise still. I think it's going to be close. I have BYU ranked 12th, Boise 13th, so BYU still gets the nod as the 4th highest ranked conference champion up to this point, projected conference champ. So they would get the nod there. Boise would still be the 12 seed. Tennessee, as of now, would be like Georgia last week. They'd be on the outside looking in despite being the 11th ranked team in our projected rankings.
Right, and you look at what Georgia did to dominate against Tennessee this past weekend. The way that they look on paper and their history, I mean, it's going to be hard to keep Georgia out as long as they stay within that 2-loss range. And I think it was huge for them to get that win there.
Yeah, if they win their next 2 games, I think they're in, I guess, barring the scenario where they have to play in Atlanta. And if they lost in that game, maybe that could knock them out. But, look, I don't think Georgia has consistently passed the eye test, but has anyone?
No.
And at the end of the day, when you look
even Oregon almost lost to Wisconsin this week.
Yeah, when you look at Georgia's resume throughout the year, they have a non-conference win over Clemson. That's a ranked opponent. They have a win in Austin, a dominant one, by the way, over Texas. And then they just handled Tennessee pretty easily, 31-17. So I think when you stack – they probably have the strongest resume among the 2-loss teams, but the committee has honored head-to-head, which is why we have Bama and Ole Miss ahead of them.
Yeah, it's a great point. And you look at these rankings, Miami, a couple weeks removed from the loss they had to Georgia Tech. Are they going to start to bounce back up in the rankings? I'm also intrigued with the Indiana situation. We're going to find out a lot this week of who they really are against Ohio State, as even though they're undefeated, they haven't played anybody. We don't really know how good Indiana actually is.
Yeah, Indiana's the team to watch this week. How do they play against Ohio State? If they lose close, what does that mean? If they get blown out, what does that mean? If they win, what does that mean for Ohio State? Are they a lock at 10-2? I don't know. And by the way, someone in the chat saying that accusing us of not watching the Tennessee-Georgia game. I watched every single snap.
I watched every play.
And I know that game was tied at halftime. After the first quarter, when Tennessee led 10-0, Georgia kicked Tennessee's ass. Doesn't mean that if they played again, that it couldn't be a different result. That's what happened on Saturday, though. Carson Beck played his best game in 2 months. So, doesn't mean Tennessee's not good. Doesn't mean they're not a playoff-worthy team. It means that on Saturday, they lost to a better team on that day.
Well, that's just I'm seeing somebody argue, about the first half, whatever it may be.
It's really the first quarter, by the way.
There's a reason why you play 4 quarters of football.
It was 31-7 after the first quarter.
Like, let's be real here. 4 quarters of football, Georgia dominated, and if you can't accept that, then you're just not living in reality.
And by the way, if you're Tennessee, if you win your last 2 games against UTEP and Vandy, you're probably in. Like, barring some chaotic scenario, you're probably in. And and chances are you avoid the SEC title game too, which is probably a good thing. So if you're Tennessee, just handle UTEP, go win at Vanderbilt in 2 weeks, and you're going to be in a good position. Still waiting to hear from the committee. Hit that subscribe button as we're going to react live with all of you. Leonardo DiCaprio, end of the season, Boise State gets the 4 seed. I think it's possible, Tyler. I think it depends on who the Big 12 champion is. I think, just my belief, if Colorado wins out and runs the table, I think they will leapfrog Boise because they've looked the part eye test-wise the last several weeks. They will add a ranked opponent or a ranked win in the Big 12 championship game. I think they would leapfrog. And I also think one-loss BYU at the end of the day would be ahead of them as well.
I know Boise State's been a cute story, but we can examine Boise State a little bit further. They haven't dominated a ton.
They haven't looked great the last month or so. All right, here come the rankings. Welcome back to the top 25, Illinois and UNLV. So my mock rankings at the bottom were off clearly. Illinois at 7-3 re-enters. UNLV at 24 enters as well. The Missouri Tigers stay ranked. That's the committee's SEC token team.
Yes.
To keep them in the top 25 at 23. I was correct on Iowa State. They re-enter at 8-2, still in the mix in the Big 12 championship hunt. We'll see who's at 21 here. We'll get these on screen just as soon as we have them. Illinois 25, UNLV 24, Missouri 23, Iowa State 22, and then producer Jack Lotteray's Arizona State Sun Devils. Welcome to the top 25. They are ranked number 21. And big win over Kansas State. What does hurt them a little bit, K-State falls out of the rankings completely, which
is their best win.
Which is their best win, so that hurts their resume a bit. I'm surprised that they fall all the way from 16 to out for a team the committee's now putting at 21. But, hey, that's how it goes.
3 losses, and you're in the Big 12, so – committee hasn't been fans of the Big 12.
Yes, Illinois, who beat Purdue 50-49. We got to put them in there.
Got to get that Big 10 team in there.
1-9 Purdue. Okay, Tulane up at number 20. The committee likes Tulane a lot for some reason, which is weird. But, hey, shout out to the Green Wave, baby. 9-2 at number 20. Army at number 19 at 9-0. So that's a top 20 matchup this weekend at Yankee Stadium, Tyler, between Army and Notre Dame.
I really hate that's going to turn into a quality win for Notre Dame.
Yeah. South Carolina at 18. I'm telling you, the Gamecocks, they're the 3-loss team to watch. They're lurking. They've been playing good ball. Beamer ball is back. Keep an eye on them. Clemson, their rival who they will play in 2 weeks, 1 spot ahead of them at 17. I think we had 17 through 19 right on the money, 16 as well, with the Colorado Buffaloes, who control their own destiny in the Big 12.
Yeah, and that South Carolina-Clemson matchup, I lean towards South Carolina. I think they're a better team.
They're playing better right now, I agree.
I think they're more well-rounded on both sides of the ball, but, yeah, that'll be a fun one to watch in rivalry week.
I like that quarterback, Lenora Sellers. He's a dynamic runner. They've gotten some explosive passes with him as well.
For my fellow college football 25ers out there, South Carolina's a fun team to play with.
Well, they got what's his name, the receiver who's 6'5", has 99 speed.
I beat this guy in college football 25, by the way.
He did beat me. We need a rematch. Texas A&M at number 15. So, BYU plummets.
Wow,
14.
outside of the top 12.
So Boise State's going to be a top 4 seed tonight. BYU drops from 6 to 14. They don't like your Jayhawks very much.
I thought that was going to happen. And so that means we're going to see a non-Power 4 team in the top 4 seeding, more than likely BYU here in just a moment.
It will be Boise State.
Or Boise State, yes.
It'll be Boise State. BYU drops to 14th. Now, they still control their destiny to the playoff. Nothing changes for them. If they win out, they will make the playoff.
Brett Yormark is not going to be happy. There will be some phone calls
tonight. But they may not control their destiny to the top 4 anymore, which is fascinating. SMU, see, this is where the committee loses me. SMU lost at home to BYU, and they have the same record.
And not to mention,
how are they ahead of BYU?
we talk about the inconsistencies too.
They've honored head-to-head.
They've honored head-to-head this entire time, and now we're changing the rules as we go. Here we go again, committee.
It was on the road.
Make it make sense.
That's a joke. I'm not even saying I'd pick BYU to beat SMU in a rematch, but that game did happen.
Why even play the game at that point?
Exactly. That makes no sense. Boise at number 12. They're going to be the 4 seed once the bracket emerges, which is crazy to think about when you think about it in that term. So A&M 15, BYU 14, SMU 12, Boise 11. I'm going to guess Tennessee's 11 here. That's where I mocked them. I think they'll be the 4th out of those 4 two-loss SEC teams with Georgia, Ole Miss, and Bama, and that is where they sit. So Tennessee at 11 at this point in time as we await the top 10. Does this mean as of now, Georgia's number 10, by the way, does BYU, they would still have a playoff spot though, right?
Yes, because they would be the 5th conference champion.
Yep.
So they would be the number 12 team.
They'll be the 12 seed, yep, as of now. Georgia 10, Ole Miss 9. See, they're honoring the head-to-head with this bunching, but not with BYU and SMU.
Doesn't make sense.
It'd be one thing if Kansas rolled BYU like 31-10 or something, but that's just not what happened.
And it goes back to what we mentioned. Clearly, the committee has not been paying attention to how Kansas has played the last few weeks.
Oh, and you ready for this? Alabama, who played Mercer this week, leapfrogs Miami.
With 2 losses.
How does that work?
So
they moved up 3 spots after playing Mercer.
So the committee clearly is in the bed for the SEC and the Big Ten.
Nick Saban may be gone, but the committee's bias for Bama remains. That's amazing.
That's incredible.
They played Mercer.
Mercer.
That's
How many people actually watched that game?
That's unbelievable.
Notre Dame at 6.
Notre Dame at 6. I think the top 5 will be chalk from last week. This is the first week of the rankings where they've lost me a little bit here.
Yes, this is the first week where the committee has made a fool of themselves. Indiana rolls in at 5.
Indiana's 5, which means the top 4 should be Oregon at 1, Ohio State 2, Texas 3, and then who am I missing at 4?
Penn State.
Penn State, which I'm not that high on, to be honest, but the committee's like
Indiana's strength of schedule this week went down, by the way. It was 100 last week. Now it's to 106.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're going to find out about Indiana this Saturday at Ohio State. Fox Big Noon kickoff, so we'll see.
Is Gus going to be awake this week?
I hope. I've been the best year for Gus. You want to push that across real quick, Jack? So 6 through 10 here. Yep. Indiana at 5. This should be the top 5. Oregon 1, Ohio State 2, Texas 3, Penn State 4, Indiana at 5. Nittany Lions officially coming in there at 4, so I would expect no changes here.
4 Big Ten teams in the top 5.
Well, that's been the case for a few weeks.
Yes, but I still think it's noteworthy.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, some of this will play out. Indiana, Ohio State, obviously. If Indiana loses, Indiana could get the BYU treatment. If they lose, they could plummet.
They could.
They could plummet.
We mentioned the 4 Big Ten teams in the top 5 again. When you look at that league beyond those 4, it's pretty pitiful.
Yep. Like the SEC.
SEC has depth that the Big Ten doesn't have.
I mean, I've shit on Missouri this year. Like, they're still pretty good. You know? Like, they're better than, like, Michigan, who's horrible this year.
Yeah. Are they better than Illinois? Maybe.
I mean, Illinois being ranked is kind of a joke. It really is. All right. So the bracket is – so the 11 seed here, Jack, is – well, it's on screen. Oh, wait, no, it's not. The 11 seed will be Who are we trying to – yeah, BYU's 12. This is tougher this week because BYU's 14.
Is that Tennessee at 11 then?
Well, no, because someone's getting squeezed out. I think Tennessee's squeezed out because because BYU is outside the top 12.
Oh, that's right.
And we still don't have 11. So Ohio State BYU is one matchup. We got Penn State is the 6th seed. They
11
face
Georgia.
11th seeded Georgia. So the only thing we got wrong on the bracket, Alabama's the 9th seed. The only thing we got wrong on the bracket, Tyler, was the Boise BYU situation.
Yeah, and I did warn that was a possibility.
Yeah, you did.
So you look at these potential matchups in our hypotheticals. Notre Dame, Alabama would be must-see TV. Penn State, Georgia would be a great game. Ohio State, I think, would probably have their way with BYU, but we mentioned it earlier. Ohio State hasn't really blown anybody out.
Yeah.
And then Indiana and Ole Miss, we would get to see what Indiana is really about, if they're really that good or not against an Ole Miss team that is as talented as anybody.
Well, let's be real. Lane Kiffin, what are you going to get? Sometimes you get the team that dominates Georgia. Sometimes you lay an egg and lose to Kentucky. That's kind of the Lane Kiffin story. So here it is. Here's the projected bracket. Tennessee, the team squeezed out right now at number 11, but I still think they're in a good position to make the bracket.
They still control their own destiny.
Probably.
You win these next two, and then if you get in the SEC title game, you win that, you're in.
Well, but they're not a lock to make the SEC title game.
No, but even if they win these next two, and are a two-loss team, they'll still be in.
And almost 100% chance. But what if Texas just knocks off A&M, nothing changes behind them? If the other two-loss SEC teams all win, if BYU runs the table, if Ohio State beats Indiana, Indiana probably falls out. So you're probably right. They probably do control their destiny.
Like, if we're doing a blind resume of a one-loss Indiana versus a two-loss Tennessee, I think Tennessee gets in.
Clears. Yeah, Tennessee clears. I think you're right. I think Indiana, they either have to beat Ohio State or they have to play them damn close. Like, we have to be sitting there at the end of the game being like, okay, this team's legit. And if we're not, then they're going to be out, I would think. They're going to be out. All right, there you have it.
And, by the way, of those matchups, Oregon would be awaiting in the Rose Bowl. Boise State would be awaiting in the Fiesta.
They've had some magic in that bowl game before.
Yes. You would have Miami waiting in the Peach Bowl and Texas awaiting in the Sugar.
Okay. There you go.
Grade the rankings. A, B, C, D, or F.
I'm not a fan tonight.
I'm not either. I'm going D.
Yeah. Having BYU behind SMU doesn't make sense. Again, it doesn't really matter because they're in if they win out regardless. But just, I think process does matter, and that's just bad process. And then I don't get randomly leapfrogging Bama over Miami because you played Mercer. If you had them ahead of them last week, that's after Miami lost, no problem.
That doesn't add up.
But the committee has said they reset every week. Well, what happened last week to have Bama? I'm sorry, you could beat Mercer 300-0. That's nothing. That doesn't matter.
I'll say this for BYU fans, though. If you do win out, I think you get that spot back over Boise State.
That's what I said earlier, because I think the whole body of work, especially if they beat a red-hot Colorado team.
And just the fact of you're the Big 12 champ versus the Mountain West champ.
Yep.
I think BYU still is in good shape, but they need to win out, though.
Yeah. Well, because they would add a win over Arizona State, who's currently ranked, and then either Colorado or Iowa State, which would be another ranked opponent.
Right.
So they would clear Boise.
And a win against Kansas State. I know they're not ranked, but still they dominated that.
Well,
thing.
and if K-State wins their final two, which they could, they'll be ranked almost certainly at 9-3. So, all right.
And then the SMU win for BYU too.
How did they just forget they played each other?
I think they did.
I'm so confused by that. Okay, we're going to do a quick segment, a little college football hot seat for some head coaches. So stick around for that, and then Tyler and I got to get out of here. It's going to be a fun week. We got 3 big matchups real quick. Picks for Notre Dame Army. BYU, Arizona State, and then Indiana, Ohio State. You going favorites there across the board? I guess I don't. Who's favored in the ASU game?
I'm going Ohio State. I'm going Arizona State, and then I'm going Notre Dame.
Yeah, I'm for sure with you on Notre Dame and Ohio State. I got to look into this BYU game a little bit more. 3-point favorite, Arizona State at home.
Scatterboo is not going to let me down.
Sun Devil Stadium's going to be lit. Is our boy Will Scott going to make a return?
Not to my knowledge.
Game is sold out. Might be the first sellout there.
When I went to Mountain America Stadium for the first time this year, it was very much a late arriving crowd.
Yeah. Well, that's just kind of the West Coast in general. That's how it goes. All right, let's get to this hot seat segment, and then we're going to call it a night. You're watching College Football Now. Harrison Graham, Tyler Jones with you. On today's show, we're going to take a look at 10 college football head coaches and kind of place them on a hot seat meter. We got 3 categories of cool, warm, and hot, and we're going to kind of analyze that as we go here. Before we do that, hit that subscribe button. We're bringing you guys college football content every single week, multiple videos during the week. We go live every Tuesday night to react to the latest college football playoff rankings. We might do some college football playoff watch parties, so lock us in for that as well. Subscribe to the channel. We also cover the NFL and the NBA. All right, let's start with Lincoln Riley, Tyler, who, you know, at the time when he went to USC, I don't blame him because they gave him over $100 million, but I always didn't love just the culture fit. He's a small Texas town kid going to L.A. Clearly it hasn't gone that well. I'll go warm because his buyout's huge. It's $90 million. Is USC ready to pay that? But I think he's back. But what if you lose to UCLA this week, then you play Notre Dame? You go 5-7. That could change pretty quickly, I think. So I'll go warm.
I agree. And you look at what Lincoln Riley has done, people point to, wow, look at Oklahoma and where they're at now. Well, they actually took significant steps backwards at Oklahoma by the end of his tenure compared to when he had started there. And now you look at USC, and he's not any better than what Clay Helton was doing. I don't see any results there. There's been a lack of quarterback play with that situation, and that's supposed to be his calling card there. But the $90 million, I think they wait this out at least one more year and try to go from there to see if they could potentially salvage this. But it's not looking good.
Yeah. Brian Kelly, I'm going to go hot. He's got a big buyout too. I don't think it's as significant as Lincoln's, but it's year 3, Tyler, and he can't sniff a 12-team playoff at LSU. That's unacceptable. The last 3 head coaches at LSU, Nick Saban, Les Miles, Ed Orgeron, all won national titles. Kelly in year 3 should be closer than this. I'm not saying they're going to fire him, but I think you could justify it. The results are not good enough.
Oh, no question about it. And LSU, we've seen time and time again, they do not give a long leash to their coaches.
No.
When Les Miles just started to struggle, he was out of there. Ed Orgeron, just 2 years removed from a national championship, he was out of there. So I'll say this. I'd be surprised if Brian Kelly ultimately does get fired. But how these next couple of weeks go, if they're not up to expectation, up to stuff, that's not going to go well for him at all.
My concern, and you guys weigh in the comments, does Brian Kelly get fired? Type Y for yes and for no is, I don't care who the head coach is, the defense shouldn't be this bad. LSU has become a joke on defense since he's been there, and that was not the case when he was at Notre Dame. They always had good defenses.
Yeah.
All right, Brent Venables, I'll go warm. Only because they gave him an extension last year, and his buyout's like $50 million now, which at
45, yeah.
45. At OU, that's pretty significant. I think people think OU's got like Texas money. They really don't. They have a lot, but I also think they're going to kind of give him the injury excuse. The amount of injuries they've had. I mean, they've been down like their top 5 receivers and a lot of their offensive linemen basically the entire season. And look, they bet on a 5-star quarterback, and he flopped, and Jackson Arnold. I think they're going to give him an offseason to try and get into the transfer portal, get some other guys in there, ideally add a quarterback, and try to salvage this thing for 2025. But I think he will be when preseason articles come out next year, coaches on the hot seat entering the 2025 season, he's going to be at or near the top of that list. I think he survives, but he will be on the hot seat entering next year.
I think so. And the excuse also that he has going for him is that, hey, I messed up on the offensive coordinator hire. Seth Luttrell was fired mid-season. There was already rumblings about them potentially getting G.J. Kinney to leave his head coaching job at Texas State to go be their offensive coordinator. He's going to get one more shot, I think, to try to get the offensive coordinator hire right. The defense has tremendously improved under him since Lincoln Riley left, but the offense has taken such a step back, and Oklahoma's identity for the last 2 decades has been their offense. That doesn't sit well with Oklahoma fans to see that offense fall apart. He'll get a chance to fix it, one last shot. They might bring back Arnold. They might go get a transfer portal quarterback and try to see what they could do from there. The offensive line, too, was such atrocious as well. That's going to need some big improvements next year.
Last thing on Venables, what also doesn't sit right with OU fans is watching Texas, as both enter the SEC, be in a far better position. I mean,
when Texas was so down compared to them.
3 years ago. I mean, the opposite was true. Like, when it was announced that they were entering the SEC, if you polled college football fans who would be the better team by year one in the SEC, 85% would say Oklahoma. And the opposite has taken place significantly.
When the announcement was made, Oklahoma fans were a lot more excited than Texas fans.
Yeah, no doubt.
But I'll say this, one more point, too. The move to the SEC is not an excuse. This Oklahoma team, they would be bad in the Big 12. They would be bad in the ACC.
They're a bad team.
They'd be bad in the Mountain West.
They're a bad team. Yeah, they're not good. Mike Norvell, I'll go warm here as well. I just don't see a scenario, Tyler, where a team that was basically a playoff team last year, they only weren't because their quarterback got hurt and the committee knew they'd get destroyed and rightfully left them out, fair or not. I'll tell you what, though, man. 1-11, if that's where this ends up, that's pretty tough to ignore. And, again, I think he's back. He just fired some assistants. I think they're giving him the opportunity to get this fixed. But, man, has there ever been a program been worse, go from, like, year over year, like 13-1 to maybe 1-11? I mean, that is atrocious.
Oh, it's terrible. And I thought it was a big red flag for how long it took Mike Norvell to get this thing going, to get back to being a contending program. This is a Florida State team that thinks they're a blue blood. They think they belong at the big dance. We've seen them trying to fight their way through the legal system to get to the SEC, the Big Ten.
They want out of the ACC.
Right. And so with that in mind, they're not going to be happy with this situation, and rightfully so. But I think that because you had that perfect regular season a year ago, it's going to be hard to move on.
I don't think it happens, but if they caught wind that they could get Dion, I do wonder if they would take that chance because this Norvell thing, to your point, last year was awesome. Every other year there has been pretty underwhelming since he's been there, and this year's been a disaster. I mean, there's no way around it.
Well, and then with Dion, he doesn't have the best relationship with Florida State these days. I don't know if he wants that job. How about Hugh Freeze at Auburn? Hot.
I think it's hot. I know it's year 2, but they're a bottom feeder in the SEC. And Auburn, I think they're kind of a delusional alumni base, but they feel like they should be at least in like the second tier of the SEC. They're one of the worst teams in the conference, and Hugh Freeze is supposed to be this offensive juggernaut. We saw what he did at Ole Miss. He upset Bama a couple of times. They're not close. I mean, they're bad. So
Peyton Thorne was terrible.
That was a terrible pickup. And to start him for a second year this year, I mean, that's kind of embarrassing.
The one saving grace for him, we saw last year, they almost upset Alabama. You could argue they should have won that game.
Oh, they should have.
If they can find a way to pull that off, then that will do wonders. That will buy him, I think, plenty of time.
If they beat Bama, he's for sure back. I don't think they want to fire a coach after 2 years. They just did that with Brian Harsin, but this is not what they signed up for. 9-3 or 9-13 in 2 years. I mean, you're not even a bowl team. It's bad, man. All right, 5 more coaches. Check out PrizePicks, today's sponsor. The best daily fantasy sports app in North America with 10 million users and counting is PrizePicks. Create an account today and take advantage of our deal, which is this. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS. Use the code CLNS. they're going to give you a $50 bonus straight into your account when you just play for $5 initially. How awesome of a deal is that? And by the way, it doesn't even matter if you win or lose that $5 entry. You'll get the additional $50 no matter what. Here's an example of what a lineup can look like. 2 or more players as long as they're on different teams. I got Jalen Milroe, more than 214.5 passing yards this weekend. Shedeur Sanders, less than 320.5 passing yards. That's 5 to win 15 on that entry. You can earn up to 100 times your money on certain entries. So go check it all out. PrizePicks.com/CLNS, the code CLNS. Get you that $50 bonus when you sign up. New customers only. Link will be in the comments and in the description of this video. Check out PrizePicks today. Pick more, pick less. It's PrizePicks. Go win some money. All right, we got 5 more coaches, on the hot seat meter. Mike Gundy, his seat's got to be pretty freaking hot, man. This feels like Gary Patterson at TCU, my alma mater, a few years ago, where it's like, I'm sure they don't want to, but Gundy, kind of like Patterson, is almost too old school, where, like, can he navigate these new waters? He hates NIL. He hates the portal. He hates that stuff. And it's one thing for Dabo to hate it and still win 9-10 games a year. This thing fell off a cliff this year. Last year, it looked like it was going to when they lost to South Alabama, and to his credit, they rallied. This year, they're 3-7, first time they've missed a bowl game, and they're underdogs in their final 2 games. They're probably going to go 3-9. It might just be time for a breakup. And I say this all the time, sports, life, whatever. Most good things don't end the way you want them to. Very few people get to leave on their own terms. Mike Gundy may not want to leave. Oklahoma State may have to just step in and say, hey, unless you're willing to adapt to what the sport is doing, you may not be a fit for what we're trying to accomplish here.
What's so surprising, too, about this Oklahoma State situation with Gundy this year is they had the most experienced offensive line in college football coming back. They had a Heisman Trophy contender in Ollie Gordon also coming back. And they felt pretty good about their defense. And yet here they are still with 7 losses. It's been an epic failure for Mike Gundy. And I'll say this. I don't know, Harry, if they're going to necessarily fire him, but I could see him being pushed out like, hey, how does retirement sound with a little extra cash?
Yeah, retirement. You'll have a booth in the stadium, that type of stuff.
How about an administrative role?
Yeah, which TCU offered Patterson. He basically told them to go F themselves. But, yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. You know what's interesting about Gundy, too? For years, he was known for having a good quarterback. It has been a while since they've had a really good quarterback. Alan Bowman was not the answer. All right, I'm going to go cool for Sharon Moore. I wanted to include him because Michigan has fallen off. People forget they had 18 NFL players go last year. Like, that's a crazy amount. I think they had the most draft picks ever in one year for one school. Obviously, they lose Harbaugh, his mentor. That's a tough shoes to fill. I think you got to give him another year to see if he can get this thing on track. I think his biggest mistake, and just theirs in general, is not adding a quarterback in the portal. Like, if you watch them play this year, if they had an average college quarterback, I'm not saying they'd be good, but they'd at least be like a serviceable 7-8 win team. They can't complete passes, Tyler. Like, it's hard to watch.
Yeah, and that's why they're going all in trying to get Bryce Underwood to decommit from LSU and go to Michigan, and throwing out this money out there to try to get him
Portnoy throwing the bag at him.
Yeah, with all that said. But you look at Michigan, and think about this time last year when people were wondering, is J.J. McCarthy really that good? What would they give to have J.J. McCarthy back right now with how much that offense has fallen off, the way that they've played? And I don't know if they're on track to get much better next year with the way things are setting up right now heading into 2025. It's not a good situation. Sharon Moore does have this going for him, though. He did go undefeated when he filled in for Jim Harbaugh last year. So he could argue, hey, I just need to get the talent in. I've proven I can win when I have my guys. I just don't have my guys right now.
He also had Harbaugh's endorsement on the way out. So, I think Michigan's going to honor that and give him a year to try and fix this. But if it's more of the same next year, they might just punt on this situation and go in a new direction. Is Sharon Moore on the hot seat? Type H for hot, C for cool. I think it's cool. I don't think he's going to get fired, but I think, again, it's one of those, let's keep an eye on this guy next year and really starting in the offseason. How do they manage this this portal situation and recruiting. They got to get some offensive firepower in there. Sam Pittman at Arkansas, I think it's got to be hot. Feels like he's been on the hot seat for a couple years, Tyler. And look, this year they've had chances in a lot of games. I mean, they easily could be 8-2. You forget they blew that Oklahoma State game, who they're terrible,
right?
By the way that's aged out. He's 28-30 in 5 years. I mean, you get 5 years at an SEC school, Tyler, and go sub 500. You're probably not getting a sixth. Like I don't think he's in a good position here.
I'll say this though, if Arkansas was going to move on from him, wouldn't they have done so by now and given Bobby Petrino a chance to see if Bobby could potentially turn things around? They haven't done that. They've stuck with their guns with Sam Pittman at this point. I also was talking to some people in Arkansas this week, Harry, some sauces, and there's rumblings about potential retirement for Sam Pittman.
Okay.
That could be his way out the door. Give him one more year, and if it doesn't work out, then him go off to the beach and hang out with Ed Orgeron.
Is he going to recruit his own 26-year-old blondes to
yes.
that beach? Gus Malzahn, UCF. I think people forget he's the UCF coach. By the way, I was looking into this. I asked you earlier, is this his second or third year? It's actually his fourth year there. Doesn't feel like it. His first 2 years, they were 18-9 in the AAC, 2 9-win seasons. Pretty good. Not great, but pretty good. But in the Big 12, he's 9-12 in 2 years. And, you know, I viewed UCF going into a Power 5 conference as like, I think this is a team, a program that not could become a blue blood, but could take off a little bit. They've got a ton of alumni. You would think they've got some boosters that would put some money into that program, and they're just not that competitive. I mean, they went in on KJ Jefferson. They had to bench him in the middle of the year because he was ineffective. His offense kind of feels expired because it was always predicated on just QB zone read, but you didn't necessarily have to be an effective passer. I think in today's college football, you got to have a quarterback who's effective throwing the ball.
Well, and it kind of reminds me of his tenure at Auburn when they started out so hot, went to a national championship game, and then he faded as the years went by. And here we are at UCF, got off to a good start. We mentioned the 18-9 record in the AAC, but now 9-12 in the Big 12. And some people are going to argue to his benefit and say, well, there's an adjustment period, go to a power conference and all that. There's a team called BYU that's doing pretty well in their second year in the Big 12. So
that's also kind of dead now, too, especially when you have a university of 70,000 students and millions of alums.
Yeah, it's a sleeping giant. If they had the right head coach, UCF could compete for the Big 12 every year.
And on top of that, in the portal era, there's not this like, hey, just give him year 5. He'll figure it out in year 5. That's like the Arkansas thing. It's like, I get it, they're not a blue blood, but like, at what point are you just a 500 coach?
Right.
I mean, that's kind of what it is. Ryan Day, just hang with us, folks. Clearly it's cool right now. I think even if you're a Ryan Day hater, he's a top 10 college coach. Most would have him in the top 5. However, Tyler, if he were to lose to Michigan for a 4th straight year, especially with Harbaugh not there, that'd be shocking if that happened. But if it did, I think there's a chance he'd be fired on the spot, not even allowed to finish the season. So I think Ryan Day's really good. I think he gets a little bit too bad of a rap. But if he loses to his arch rival again, I do think they would fire him.
The silver lining, though, even if he does lose to Michigan, he could still win the national championship. And then all would be forgiven if he could potentially do that. But, yeah, can't lose to Michigan. I think there's also kind of like we talked about with a couple of these coaches where Ryan Day could pull a John Calipari where he gets out before they fire him. I think he could still get a very good job elsewhere, but he cannot afford to lose to Michigan one more time.
I mean, especially this Michigan team. I mean, they're just atrocious. All right, name a coach you think gets fired this offseason. Maybe there's someone we're not thinking of. Drop his name down in the comment section below. Thanks so much for tuning into College Football Now. Hit that subscribe button on the way out. More videos to come here at Chat Sports. All right, thank you guys so much for tuning in tonight. Our rankings reaction show. 2 weeks in the regular season, then championship Saturday. I mean, we're closing in.
We're almost there.
We're almost there. Should be.
I'm kind of sad, honestly. I love the college football regular season.
I know. I will say, it's going to be better this year because before you get through championship Saturday, then you're waiting a month before any games that matter take place. it's going to be here pretty quick. Like mid-December, we're playing playoff games.
Can't
so
wait.
Should be fun. We'll be here next week. I think Tyler's actually off, but I'll be back. I think it's at 7 o'clock Central, 8 Eastern next week. So we'll be sure to join us for that. Turn on those notifications. He's Tyler Jones. Shout out to producer Jack Latare. His Sun Devils, big game against BYU this weekend. My name is Harrison Graham. We'll see you guys soon here at Chat Sports.